Now, before I read, what you need to understand is in one of the clearest, most concise forms in the New Testament, Paul in Ephesians 1 through 3 has summarized the narrative of the gospel. And what he's going to do in Ephesians 4 is tell you how to live in light of the narrative of the gospel. How to live not just with your little story mentality, but live with that big story mentality that we talked about. What is it like? What does it mean to live the narrative of the gospel? Verse 1 of chapter 4. I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness and patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. Now let's just stop there. You ought to be very aware of this fact, that when Paul thinks about what it means to live in a way that's worthy of the gospel, the very first thing that comes to mind is relationships. The very first thing that comes to mind is community. That's how essential, that's how central, that's how important that is in Paul's understanding of the present work of God in your life and the life of His church. He cannot think of anything first. This is utterly shelf one of his thinking of what it means to live in a way worthy of the gospel. And let's talk about what that word means. When Paul says, live worthy of the gospel, he's not saying get your act together and live in a way that lives up to the gospel. It's not what he's saying. This is not a legalism that he's giving you at this moment. He's saying, don't you understand this worthy gospel that you've been given this glorious gospel. This gospel is worthy of your living. Live out of the gospel. You see the difference? Don't live up to the gospel. You can't do that. Don't even try. You have no ability whatsoever to live up to the gospel. If you could, the gospel wouldn't have needed to be the gospel. Right? If you could live what the cross produces, the cross wouldn't have been necessary. I hate how this is interpreted. I heard preacher after preacher say, you've been given a beautiful gospel, get your act together. No, he's saying, this is a beautiful, worthy provision. Live out of this provision. Live out of this glory. Live out of this gift. Live out of how your identity has been transformed, how there's now hope for you. Live out of that. And if you're going to live out of that, get serious about your relationships.